At 3 a.m., her phone vibrated once and froze like a heartbeat that forgot its job. Ava Morgan stared at the banner that said, "We need to talk," and felt the floor become water. She whispered into the dark that airports were churches to her faith. Ava said, "Ethan, pick up," and the ringtone looped like a drip. She replayed the nights she waited in hotel lobbies until the carpets learned her steps. Jordan said, "You cannot keep bleeding for someone who never shows." She paced the window, counting planes like excuses. Ava said, "He promised next month," and the clock rolled its eyes. A rideshare notification flashed, cruel and bright. She said, "I will meet you halfway," to a phone that had turned into a wall. The message stayed unread, a small coffin. Wind pressed the glass, and her reflection looked like someone who borrowed her life. Ava said, "Tell me I am not a standby." The city exhaled sirens, and the night offered no receipt. Morning did not arrive. It negotiated a truce with the dark and sent gray terms through the blinds. Ava brewed coffee she would not drink and watched steam act out hope that faded. She scrolled up to the first message that built this house of waiting. Ava said, "You made the distance feel small," and her voice was steady like old stairs. She remembered saving for flights instead of birthdays and calling airports by pet names. Jordan said, "You gave him your calendar and he gave you his, maybe." She opened a folder of confirmations like trophies from a war of almosts. Ava said, "He said the winter would end with us in one city." She counted the inches between her and the door and called them oceans. The kettle clicked, and the sound felt final. Ava said, "Today I ask for a truth I can spend," and the room leaned in. By noon she sat in a rideshare tracing raindrops that mapped a city she no longer trusted. The driver asked if the airport felt like home, and she smiled like a closed book. Ava said, "Home is a gate that never opens," and the tires sighed. She rehearsed what to say if he answered, counting promises like receipts. "Ah." The terminal roof appeared like a ship turning in fog. Jordan said, "If he wanted to, he would be here," and the phrase lodged in her throat. She pictured Ethan at a desk with someone laughing just off frame. Ava said, "Tell me not to be that woman," and the seat belt felt like a warning. Her phone buzzed, only a sale on luggage, and she almost laughed. The car slowed, and glass doors breathed warm air that smelled like leaving. Ava said, "I will ask and I will hear," and stepped into the hum. Inside the terminal, she moved with people who knew where they were going. Announcements stitched the air with destinations that sounded like promises. Ava said, "Gate B is where he once ran toward me," and memory quickened her step. She passed a cafe where she once waited 3 hours to call it fate. Jordan said, "Memory edits the parts that hurt," and the espresso machine hissed in agreement. She opened his social feed and saw a tagged photo she did not recognize. A woman leaned near him at a bar, shoulders almost touching. Ava said, "It could be nothing," and her stomach became air. She zoomed and the caption read, "Late nights, big minds." The date mocked her calendar. Ava said, "Answer me, Ethan," and tapped call, but the ringtone folded into applause from a nearby gate. She lowered the phone and kept walking. At Gate B she took the same seat she once claimed like a flag, and faced the tarmac where planes rehearsed leaving. She opened a draft that had waited for courage. Ava said, "I love you enough to hear the worst," and the words steadied like a handrail. A child laughed nearby, and the sound made the future feel rented. She pictured the woman in the photo and tried to give her a harmless name. Jordan said, "Name the truth before it names you," and she hit record. Ava said, "Ethan, I am here, and I need the answer you keep in your pocket," and silence listened. She ended the message and watched it fly into a cloud that never rained. The board flickered, and her reflection broke into tiles. Ava said, "If you lie, let it be the last," and the gate clock began to count her down. Ava counted months by boarding passes and pay stubs that smelled like burnt coffee. She learned exchange rates the way other people learned lullabies. Ava said, "I can stretch rent if I skip the holiday flight," and clicked save. She wore the same denim jacket because routine felt like armor. Jordan said, "You keep paying tolls for a bridge he rarely crosses," and sighed. She remembered the winter she sold a camera to fund a ticket that became a credit. Ava said, "He promised spring would bring us one table, one set of keys," and believed it. She kept time by time, zones and alarms that woke her at brutal hours. The city moved on without asking her permission. Ava said, "Love is work, and I am not lazy," and folded another list. A photo of a hotel chair watched like a witness. She opened the message thread and touched the first hello like a relic. After lunch she called Ethan and rehearsed the light voice that never sounded light. The tone rang into a distance that had learned her name. Ava said, "I miss your noise," and stared at a plant that refused to die. He answered with warmth that arrived like sunlight through blinds. Ethan said, "Work swallowed me. I am coming up for air," and she believed half. She asked about the late-night photo and kept the tremor in her pocket. Ethan said, "Maya runs our team. We were pitching, and the word we rang." She pictured a bar where schedules loosened like ties. Ava said, "Tell me I still live in your calendar," and listened for paper. He promised a flight after the quarter closed and moved a deadline like furniture. Ava said, "I will hold the door open," and hung up gently. The room recovered its silence and did not apologize. Evening invited memories that trafficked in half-truths and soft focus. Ava walked past the library where she first mapped their cities on napkins. She had believed that plans could bully fate into compliance. Ava said, "I will pass every test you give me," and the words tasted like chalk. She remembered the night she taught him her airport rituals. Ethan said, "Send me the gate photos so I can pretend I am near," and she had sent it. A voicemail from her mother sat unread like a bill. Mother said, "Love should not be a hunger strike," and she avoided the lesson. She reached the river and let the wind grade her resolve. Ava said, "I am loyal, not lost," and watched lights move like promises. A siren cut the water with a red line she did not cross. She turned home carrying a tired kind of hope. Back home, she let Jordan in without ceremony and brewed honesty like tea. Jordan surveyed the room as if measuring the cost of hope. Jordan said, "You treat doubt like a trespass when it is a tenant," and sat. She handed him the photo and watched his eyes do math. Jordan said, "Read the caption again without your heart editing it," and waited. She felt the sentence resize itself until it fit the worst meaning. Ava said, "I am scared of becoming a story people whisper," and bit her lip. He reminded her of the time she left a party to chase a signal. Jordan said, "Your devotion is real, but his schedule is a mirror you keep cleaning," and paused. She laughed in a way that sounded like surrender, and then caught it. Ava said, "I need proof I can hold," and the kettle clicked. The room smelled like rain and hard truths. Before sleep, she wrote a list titled, "Reasons I Stayed," and let it judge her kindly. She remembered the August layover when he read her a chapter over speaker. Ethan said, "I like the way you make time feel obedient," and she had glowed. She remembered the winter fever he tracked by hours and thermometers. Ava said, "You made distance feel sweet, and then you made it feel normal," and winced. She wrote that faith is a habit, and habits are furniture you forget you own. She wrote that love is not a receipt, but it should balance sometimes. Jordan said, "Do not confuse effort with evidence," and she underlined it. The page looked strong under the lamp, and weak in the dark. Ava said, "I will ask for the simple truth and accept the hard one," and closed the notebook. Sleep approached like a careful apology, and did not stay long. Morning emails stacked like bricks, and none built a door. Ava refreshed the thread where promises slept without dreams, and felt the hours lean. Jordan said, "You are managing a project with no deadline," and rubbed his eyes. She searched her budget for flights, and found only margins. Ava said, "I can trade sleep for certainty," and set a 2 a.m. alarm. A notification from Ethan arrived with 4 lines, and 3 excuses. Ethan said, "Quarter-end chaos, I swear I am trying," and the word trying sagged. She typed a bright reply and deleted it twice. Ava said, "Tell me the day, not the feeling," and pressed send. The room answered with radiator clicks, a language of almost. She mapped the week on sticky notes like life rafts. Ava said, "If love is work, submit your timesheet and close the laptop." The silence gathered its paperwork and stayed. After dusk she joined a group call. Ethan framed as quick alignment and met voices she could not place. Maya spoke with sprint-ready polish that made air move. Maya said, "We pivoted and shipped the demo, and the word we pressed." Ethan laughed, the laugh he saved for winning. Ava said, "Congrats, that sounds huge," and swallowed the taste of distance. Someone asked about celebrations and glasses clinked through speakers. Maya said, "We owe Ethan a city night," and applause followed like proof. Ava imagined the bar light, and the way closeness at its people. Ethan said, "Rain check on my end, I promised my girl a weekend," and heat touched her face. The call ended with stickers and thumbs. Ava said, "Weekend means days with anchors," and waited for a calendar link. The screen dimmed, and her reflection looked almost brave. The weekend arrived disguised as errands and interruptions. Flights climbed out of the airport like answers she could not buy. Ava said, "Send me the time and I will carry the hours," and kept her tone even. He replied with ellipses that felt like traffic. Ethan said, "Let me fix a snag and then I am yours," and the snag multiplied. She walked past a bridal shop and measured the ache with window glass. Jordan said, "You are borrowing hope at high interest," and held the door to a cafe. She ordered tea and found old photos that praised beginnings. Ava said, "We were simple when we were hungry," and smiled without teeth. A couple argued softly nearby and made honesty sound expensive. She typed a long message and replaced it with a single question. Ava said, "Are we still us?" and set the phone face down. His answer arrived late with a calendar invite that wore cologne. Ethan said, "Sunday night, finally free," and she accepted like a vow. She set alarms, tidied corners, and rehearsed questions that did not beg. Ava said, "I need facts that stand up in daylight," and folded a blanket smooth. Hours slid until night opened. The call connected and showed a room she did not know. A jacket draped on a chair she did not recognize. Ava said, "Where are you?" and smiled like a test pattern. He said, "At a teammate's place finishing notes," and the word place echoed. A laugh floated from off-screen and did not apologize. Ava said, "Tell me the name," and waited. Ethan said, "Maya is here, we are closing loops," and the loops pulled tight. She felt something quiet tear, clean, and careful. After the call ended, the room forgot how to hold her shape. She opened their earliest photos and watched certainty age. Ava said, "I waited in airports because you said love flies," and the line cracked. She remembered the winter fever and the mercy that felt easy. Jordan said, "If you need a question answered, ask it like a door," and sent a heart. She typed a message that asked without theater. Ava said, "Are you with her beyond work?" and pressed send with 2 fingers. The dots appeared, vanished, returned like tide. Ethan said, "You know me," and it was not yes, and not no. She felt the future tilt and chose a railing. Ava said, "Then answer plain," and locked the screen. The city breathed past the glass, patient and unconcerned. She inhaled until the hurt had edges. The airline called to confirm a redeemed companion ticket, and used her last name like a question. Ava said, "I did not fly," and felt the room list. The agent read the traveler names, and the second was Maya. Ava ended the call, and stared at the receipts she had curated like proof. Jordan said, "Say it plain to yourself before you say it to him," and waited. She opened the loyalty portal and saw her miles drained to 0. Ava said, "He took what I saved for us and flew it elsewhere," and the words steadied. She remembered selling her camera and naming the sacrifice. The screen displayed dates that overlapped with his excuses. Ava said, "This is not a misunderstanding," and printed the itinerary. The printer spit out paper like verdicts. She put the pages in a folder labeled Truth and locked the zipper. She called Ethan and let the ring carve a straight line through her chest. Ava said, "You used my miles for a companion fare with Maya," and kept her voice level. He inhaled the way guilty people study silence. Ethan said, "It was last minute for a client. She had status issues and tripped on status. She read the dates and the lounge charges like scripture." Ava said, "You wrote to me that night about delays you never had, and waited." He tried to conjure chaos with soft words. Ethan said, "Nothing happened the way you think," and the sentence bent. She pictured him in a chair that was not hers. Ava said, "I need the whole sentence, not the half," and closed her eyes. He promised an explanation in person and begged for 12 hours. She ended the call and listened to the apartment learn a new quiet. A message arrived from Maya that tasted like metal. Maya said, "He told me you two were on a break he was fixing," and the line knocked. Ava asked to meet where truth could not hide behind filters. They chose the hotel bar near the office tower. Maya said, "I did not know about your miles until he flashed the upgrade," and looked down. The bartender wiped a ring from the wood, as if erasing a claim. Ava said, "Did he ask you to lie for him?" and held the gaze. Maya said, "He asked me to keep things neat at work," and neat sounded dirty. The photo that haunted Ava unpacked itself on the table. Ava said, "I am not asking for an apology, I am collecting facts," and stacked the prints. The elevator chimed like a jury returning. Ethan texted that he had landed and asked where to meet, as if logistics could rescue character. Ava said, "Gate B, where we once believed things," and pressed send. She arrived early and watched the doors release travelers like alibis. Jordan said, "Do not audition for a love you already performed," and squeezed her shoulder. She held the folder like a passport to a country she might not enter again. Ethan appeared with the same navy jacket and a tired smile she no longer trusted. Ava said, "I have receipts for every mile your story traveled," and opened a zipper. He reached for her hand as if touch could edit math. Ethan said, "I was scared to lose the account and I got addicted to the lift," and the word lift scraped. She kept her fingers on paper, and not on him. They moved to a quiet corner where the announcements could not translate pain. Ava said, "Did you tell her we were paused because I was inconvenient?" and watched his eyes. He confessed in pieces that sounded like emails. Ethan said, "I kept thinking I could fix the story if I outran it," and sighed. She set the photo next to the companion receipt and let them argue with each other. Ava said, "You did not stumble into betrayal, you booked it," and the sentence landed. He reached for the word love, as if it still opened doors. Ethan said, "I do love you," and the vowel thinned. She remembered every airport bench she had named for hope. Ava said, "Love without truth is only weather," and closed the folder. The speaker called final boarding for a city they would not share tonight. They chose a hotel lobby because the city had too many witnesses. Ava said, "No metaphors tonight, only answers," and set her phone face down. Ethan's smile arrived late and left early. He said, "I panicked and I kept panicking," and watched the carpet. The air smelled like lemon polish and practiced apologies. Ava said, "You spent my miles and my sleep," and did not blink. He reached for history like a coupon that had expired. Ethan said, "We can repair this if you let me prove it," and spread empty hands. The elevator chimed and patients stepped out. Ava said, "I forgave delays, not detours," and felt the words land. He named deadlines, clients, and storms that always seemed scheduled. Ava said, "Name the choice, not the weather," and lifted her chin. The lobby clock clicked and refused to help either of them. They moved to a quiet lounge where the piano kept secrets. Ethan said, "I told Maya we were complicated, not broken," and the word complicated tilted. Ava imagined the ledger of every lonely gate and added interest. She said, "You wanted comfort on both coasts," and folded her arms. He spoke of stress the way tourists speak of weather. Ethan said, I turned to the nearest voice, and then tried to outrun it, and swallowed. She placed the itinerary between them like a mirror. Ava said, this paper knows more honesty than your mouth, and watched him read. He asked for a do-over that did not exist. Ethan said, tell me how to make this right, and the question sounded borrowed. Ava said, start with truth that hurts you too, and the room tightened. The piano rested its hands and listened. He began with fragments that tried to dodge the center. Ethan said, there was a kiss after the demo win, and silence counted to 10. Ava remembered the night she prayed over a standby seat. She said, did you book the room with my miles? And he flinched. He confessed to upgrades that felt like theft wearing courtesy. Ethan said, I told myself I would repay it with a surprise trip, and the sentence broke. She felt anger sharpen into a tool that fit her hand. Ava said, you are not clumsy, you are convenient, and he looked away. He asked for time the way gamblers ask for luck. Ethan said, I choose you now, and the now sounded late. Ava said, I choose me first, and the floor steadied. Somewhere a bellhop laughed at a different story. Her phone buzzed, and Jordan's name steadied her spine. Jordan said, speak the decision, not the rehearsal, and the advice clicked. She looked at the door and measured the cost of exit. Ava said, you will send a written confession that matches the dates, and placed a pen near him. He nodded like a man facing inventory. Ethan said, I will write it, and I will repay every mile, and reached for the page. She added one condition that tasted like iron. Ava said, you will tell Maya the full truth without the word complicated, and waited. He agreed, and the pen finally moved. Ethan said, I am sorry, and the word looked thin on paper. She watched the signature bloom like a bruise. Ava said, this is closure, not credit, and stood. Outside the rain had softened into a lesson. He followed to the awning as if weather could bargain. Ethan said, do not end us in a lobby, and took one step close. She remembered airports that felt like prayers and hotels that felt like tests. Ava said, I carried us while you carried Alibis, and the night held still. He asked for a final chance shaped like next month. Ethan said, I will show up at gate B with a ring, and Hope tried to stand. She pictured the gate clock counting her down again. Ava said, show up for yourself first, and moved into the rain. He stayed under the awning, and let her take the weather. Ava said, if you call, use the truth as your name, and did not look back. The city accepted her like a door she finally owned. Morning arrived without ceremony, and set everything at its smallest volume. Ava folded the denim jacket, and felt the weight of habits leave her wrists. She opened a new note titled, Terms, and wrote rules that did not tremble. Ava said, no waiting in lobbies, no flights bought with hope, and underlined twice. She put the signed confession in a folder that would not live on her nightstand. Jordan said, grief is work, and you already know how to work, and poured coffee. She canceled alerts for fare drops and time zones that stole sleep. Ava said, I am not a gate, I am a door, and the room stood taller. A refund from the loyalty desk arrived like a slow apology. She did not text Ethan to narrate the deposit. Ava said, I heal in private, and I love in daylight, and let the window breathe. Quiet felt earned instead of empty. By afternoon she met Maya beneath a ceiling of boiled steel and glass that made honesty echo. They did not order drinks because patience had a bill. Maya said, I told him the whole truth, and I told HR the half you missed, and exhaled. Ava watched relief arrive without glamour. Ava said, I needed your sentence to match the dates, and slid the folder back into her bag. Maya named the kiss, the upgrade, and the nights repackaged as diligence. Jordan said, closure is a door that opens inward first, in a text that landed like a hand. Ava thanked Maya without forgiving Ethan by proxy. She declined the apology that tried to hire her as witness. Ava said, take care of your calendar, and stood up straighter. They parted like commuters who had finally reached their stops. Evening drew the city in graphite, and trimmed the noise to essentials. Ava called her mother and placed the phone on the table like a witness. Mother said, "Pain is a teacher that does not grade on a curve," and waited. Ava chose plain words and left the embroidery in the drawer. Ava said, "I wanted distance to behave, and it behaved like distance, and breathed." They counted small survivals instead of losses that like to multiply. Mother promised soup and a weekend without questions. Jordan said, "Let us replace rituals that hurt," and listed movies with clean endings. Ava unfollowed airports she had named like pets, and smiled at herself. Ava said, "I will buy a camera again with money that is mine," and felt steadier. The night did not fix her, but it stopped asking for blood. On Sunday she walked into the airport like a museum where she had once lived. She did not check departures, and she did not practice waiting. Ava said, "Date B is an exhibit now, and let memory keep its plaque." She mailed Ethan's spare key with tracking and no note. A child pressed a face to the glass and reminded her that leaving can be delight. The loudspeaker announced whether she would not negotiate. Ava said, "I do not audition for absence," and kept moving. She bought a postcard of a runway and wrote to herself in present tense. Jordan said, "When you leave, take you with you," and she laughed. She walked past her old seat and felt nothing hollow out. Ava said, "I am not the lie he waited on," and stepped back into weather she chose. Monday returned with calendars that could be trusted. Ava reclaimed a morning walk and let the river keep its pace. She bought a used camera from a shop that smelled like repairs and mercy. Ava said, "I will shoot mornings that do not ask me to beg," and tested the shutter. A message from Ethan arrived that prayed without nouns, and she archived it. Jordan said, "Freedom is a schedule that fits," and sent a playlist that did not ache. She drafted a letter to future love with sentences shaped like doors. Ava said, "Bring daylight and receipts of kindness," and closed the file. She booked a small trip to a city that never needed her proof. The confirmation did not tremble, and neither did she. The week opened like a window she could finally lift. The week folded quietly and left room for air. Ava walked past the hotel where apologies molted and did not look up. She held the new camera and let focus belong to her. Ava said, "I choose mornings that answer," and pressed the shutter. A voicemail from Ethan waited like stale weather, and she left it sealed. Jordan said, "Peace looks good on you," and the words fit. She passed a florist and remembered buying roses for arrivals that never arrived. Ava said, "I returned flowers to their own stories," and kept moving. The street hummed a key she could sing. A bus stop poster showed a beach and did not demand proof. Ava said, "I will be my own destination," and the thought landed. The city peeled away its old labels and offered names she could keep. She walked home with daylight in her pocket. At home, she stacked the last souvenirs of waiting on the table. A gate tag, a hotel key, a napkin with a flight number that once felt holy. Ava said, "Thank you for the lesson," and closed the box. She slid it high in a closet where memory could cool. Jordan said, "Ritual completed," and tapped the lid. She brewed tea without bargaining with time. Ava said, "This cup serves only now," and the steam agreed. An email arrived with a job interview that did not require red-eye faith. She felt fear try to borrow her spine and refused the loan. Ava said, "I am not late to my life," and wrote back yes. The kettle clicked and sounded like a small door closing well. She sat by the window and watched weather without forecasts. She met Maya outside the office tower and gave back a kindness that required no receipt. Maya said, "He is taking leave and facing the numbers," and looked steadier. Ava did not taste triumph and was grateful. Ava said, "We share the cost and we keep the road clean," and offered a nod. They talked about books that do not lie and cities that forgive. Jordan said, "This is what grown endings look like," in a text that smiled. The streetlight changed and let strangers cross like punctuation. Ava said, "May your deadlines be honest," and stepped aside. They parted with a quiet, that did not threaten. The sky kept its blue, and no alarms rang. Near sunset, she walked the river and let the camera teach her patience. Water took the light and gave it back improved. Ava said, "I am not waiting, I am arriving," and framed the bridge. A child's kite rose and stitched color through the sky. She remembered the first hello and felt mercy, not hunger. Jordan said, "Take the shot, and let it stand," and she did. Her phone buzzed and showed Ethan's name like a museum label for an artifact. She did not open the message and nothing broke. Ava said, "I choose silence that heals over answers that bruise," and kept walking. The wind braided her hair with salt and promise. Day slipped into a ribbon of brass and did not ask for proof. Night arrived with a clean horizon and a moon that did not negotiate. Ava set an alarm for morning that belonged only to her. She wrote one final line in the letter to the life she was keeping. Ava said, "I will not trade daylight for maybe," and signed her name. She placed the letter in the drawer where keys sleep. Jordan said, "Proud of you," and the words landed softly. Her phone lit with Ethan's call and turned the room pale. She watched it ring without argument. Ava said some doors closed gently and let it fade. The city settled, the window cooled, and the quiet learned her shape. Then she chose her final sentence and owned it.